Hey everyone, it's John Heath here again for Milton Rose Learning with another Let's Learn video on the poem Checking Out Me History. Okay, so a little bit of John Agard today, focusing on issues of kind of memory politics and race. I always find that you've got to love a poet who writes some of his poems in the pub. So we're going to look at some of the key context today and what's going around at the time when this poem was written. We'll have a little poetry reading. I will spare you any kind of West Indian accents. I'll just read it fairly straight as best I can. And then we will look at some of the key annotations which should go into your poetry anthologies. So first off then, let's look at the key context. Okay, so this is a poem very much about race and cultural identity. So let's have a little look here. Okay, you can see all those kind of cultural icons just on the right. So Agard reflects on the erasure or the erasing of black history in British education. So he's highlighting the dominance of what we would call Eurocentric narratives, European ways of looking at things, and the lack of representation of Caribbean heroes and cultural figures. So he's very much kind of saying, well, kind of Afro-Caribbean figures, there's been some absolutely, world famous historical figures, but they're not really studied in history. So why? And if we do that for too long, they'll get forgotten. Figures like, obviously, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, even if we extend further into history, kind of figures like Barack Obama and things like that, although he was a president, so it's kind of hard to forget him. But nevertheless, if we don't remember these Afro-American kind of heroic figures, then they'll get forgotten forever. Okay, it's what they call the politics of memory, what gets remembered and what doesn't get remembered in the history books. Okay, the second one is resistance and empowerment. So the poem celebrates kind of reclaiming one's identity and personal history, encouraging pride in Caribbean heritage and challenging cultural silences. He's basically arguing that history has normally been a white kind of pursuit, and we tend to remember kind of white kind of historical figures. But we shouldn't. We should open the doors to kind of Afro-American figures and challenge that cultural erasure. And then also, I think for context, you have John Agard blends his own personal experience with political critique here. So he uses a very, very conversational tone and dialect from the kind of the Caribbean to assert authority over his own history. He says, I'm going to speak in my Caribbean voice, okay, and that in itself is a political statement, and over his own history and challenge official accounts taught in schools. So he's very much drawing on the language of his youth here in this poem, and you'll kind of see that here. Okay, so we have two kind of really big figures in the poem. So Toussaint L'Ouverture, a Haitian kind of leader and commander, and Mary Seacole there, who you can kind of research. So we've got the poem on the left. It's too big to kind of get in one go. So we're going to have a little poetry reading of it here. As I said at the start, I will just read it in my Brummie accent as best I can, and we'll try and get a good grip on this poem. Okay, so let's start then. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me? Bandage up me eye with me own history, blind me to my own identity. Dem tell me about 1066 and all dat. Dem tell me about Dick Whittington and he cat, but Toussaint L'Ouverture, no dem never tell me about dat. So he's basically saying like, the English education system, it's just kind of focusing on the wrong things, and it's not focusing on Afro-American kind of Afro-Caribbean kind of figures, I should say. Toussaint, a slave with vision, lick back Napoleon battalion and first Black Republic born, Toussaint de Thorn to de French, Toussaint de Beacon of the Haitian Revolution. Let's just scroll down. So he's kind of bigging up that historical figure there. Let's just get that third bit in. Dem tell me 'bout de man who discovered de balloon and de cow who jump over de moon. Dem tell me 'bout de dish run away with de spoon, but dem never tell me 'bout Nanny de Maroon. Nanny see far woman of mountain dream, of firewoman struggle, hopeful stream to freedom river. Dem tell me 'bout Lord Nelson and Waterloo, but dem never tell me 'bout Shaka de Great Zulu. Dem tell me 'bout Columbus and 1492, discovery of America obviously. But what happened to de Caribs and de Arawaks too? So he's really kind of fighting, isn't he, here to upset that Eurocentric narrative of history and open conceptual space for Afro Caribbean figures to be remembered as well. So the last few stanzas. Dem tell me 'bout Florence Nightingale and She Lamp, and how Robin Hood used to camp. Dem tell me 'bout old King Cole was a merry old soul, but dem never tell me 'bout Mary Seacole. From Jamaica she travelled far to the Crimean War, she volunteered to go, and even when the British said no, she still braved the Russian snow. A healing star among the wounded, a yellow sunrise to the dying. Dem tell me what dem want to tell me, but now I checking out me own history, I carving out me identity. So he's basically saying, isn't he, that the kind of inherent, I suppose, institutionally racist historical books that only focus on kind of white figures need to be opened up. And he's kind of not, Agard is not kind of hopeful of that. So he started to check out his own history and actually kind of check out his own roots. Okay. Very powerful poem in that sense. So let's look now at some of the annotations that we should worry about. Okay. So in the opening lines, dem tell me, repetition, obviously, and it's frustration with authoritative selective history, and it creates a rhythmic insistence, almost like a song in some ways. Very powerful repetition at the start. Colonial control of knowledge as well, so it's highlighting how official education policy silences non-European stories. Okay, so we don't focus enough on Afro-Caribbean narratives and figures. I think that's the core political point of this poem, and it comes out from the first line. I think I would focus as well on the European history references. So bandage up my eye with my own history, blind me to my own identity. That's the political impact of this. What happens if we don't teach Afro-Caribbean history? So the education system prevents him from seeing his true heritage. I think that's contained in that metaphor about bandaging up his eye. Blind me as well. It enforces ignorance and loss of cultural identity, especially if you are Afro-Caribbean. You kind of lose touch with your kind of ancestors and your kind of historical figures who you should be proud of. I think also there's post-colonial historical references. So what happened to the Caribs and the Arawaks too? So there's a contrast here. So he's basically saying, some of those indigenous peoples suffered terribly at the hands of kind of white colonial masters. So he's critiquing there the mainstream focus on European events and the erasure of the Caribbean peoples. Why aren't we focusing on them? We never study Carib history, for instance, so it's very, very rare. And also the historical injustice. It highlights colonization, where white nations from Europe used to go into the Caribbean and islands and just basically enslave populations there, and the suppression of the indigenous people there. So he's got a real political message there. And then closing lines, I think, on carving out my identity is very powerful denouement to the poem. The metaphor of carving, so the active reclaiming of history, is having to carve it, so there's resistance, he's having to really force it out, but his agency is restored. He restores his own identity by doing so. Personal and collective identity, I think it asserts both his individual pride, his own identity, and cultural recognition. And by carving out his own identity, he undercuts and challenges the Eurocentric educational kind of history books. Okay, so it's a very powerful poem in that sense. Really, really powerful. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. We looked at just a few of the contextual points underpinning checking out my history. We had a reading of it as best I could, poetic reading of it, and then we've pulled out some of the key annotations of this poem, and this video hopefully provides a launch pad now for your revision of the poem. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to never miss another Let's Learn video again. We'll be back obviously soon with more poetry. If you have anything you want to say or any comments, please do pop them in the box and we'll always reply. And it just remains to say, yeah, keep checking out your history, and we will see you soon. Take care.